let's just get your name ranking.
Okay, I'm Earl Everett Tarver,
Right.
private all the way through.
Right.
Didn't want responsibility.
Not even first class?
No.
Yeah.
And what else you want to know?
Your company.
Oh, F Company.
What was your MOS? What'd you do?
I did everything. We had to learn everything. But I went in Italy. I was on a bazooka.
All right.
And after that, in Italy, bazooka, when we moved to southern France, Soissons, or jumped in southern France, I won on a BAR, me and another guy with ammo in the BAR.
So you were a bazooka man.
Yes, I was.
What was that like? I mean,
It was a scary sort of a deal because they would say, you and your helper go out.
your name and your rank.
Earl E. Traver, private rank, is private, my rank private, and F Company.
And what did you do?
I was a bazooka man in Italy, and what had.
And what was it like to carry a bazooka?
Well, they were long and heavy, and you carried a bag of ammunition, and when you got shelled, you threw it as far as you could, hoping they wouldn't blow up, because they could blow up from shrapnel.
Sure.
But now, am I doing what you want me to do?
Yeah, you're doing great.
Okay. But anyway, they would come to you and say, go up this road about 2.5 miles, you and your partner, and dig a couple slit trenches. And we've heard of the Tiger tank coming, and see if you could knock a track off it. Well, you was by yourself, and I had one experience I want to tell you about on
Let's
that.
do it, yeah.
They moved us up there. We went up there, and we was digging in the trench, digging them because we had to have one this way, one this way, and we was digging, and I looked up, and here's 3 Germans standing there about 6 feet from me with their rifles slung. And I told old Wright, I said, Norman, don't touch your gun, because our guns was laying over there, you know, because we was digging. I said, I didn't have a gun, but he had a rifle. And I said, look up carefully, there's 3 Germans standing in front of us. And he said, who you kidding, Merle? Because you know we all joked all the time. I said, I'm not kidding you, be real careful. So he looked up, because he was facing that way and I was facing this way. He turned his head and looked, and he said, oh my God. So the guys just stood there, and then they wanted to know if we was English. And we said, no, we're American. And so we got up there by then, and they took the rifles off and handed them to us. And I said, what are you? He said, Polacks. They'd been forced to fight. And so then, about that time, he signaled, and here's 2 more come from across the street. They had their rifles on us, and if we shot them, they was going to shoot us. But they wanted to surrender.
Right.
So a few minutes later, I don't know whether Dick Seiss remembered or not. I want to ask him about it. But him and our company commander came walking down that road, and here we are with these prisoners. And I believe they were the first prisoners captured in the, probably, I know they were at our company, but may have been in the battalion, I don't know.
Right.
But we was just our first couple of days in combat that happened.
So they spoke to you in English then?
Just broken English, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it just was a weird thing, and I've never even mentioned it to anybody, really.
And it wasn't, how far away were they? Maybe 20 feet? Or?
Oh, no, they were only about 6 or 8 feet.
Wow.
Because we were trying to get dug in earnest, you know, and we had those old shovels that bent over like that, and then you hack them. And we was trying to get it done, and I just happened to look up, and there they were. And they could have just blown our head off.
Right.
But
That was a close one.
yeah, it was a close one. But anyway, that's and then they come to find out that the Tiger had broke a track back up the line a ways and was down.
Right.
And so we didn't have to do anything.
That's a good story. Is there another one in Italy that you remember like that, or something that happened that's...
Well, I remember one, you probably wouldn't want to hear it, but we was leaning up against, laying back on a railroad track, berm, because it was elevated with dirt,
Right.
and they were shelling that, and we was laying there, and our company commander was standing, him and a couple of officers standing there. We was leaning there, and this kid that was with us, now he was from the 596. And I was sitting there, and I watched him. He took his M1, because they carried M1s. Some of them, they're guys. They was engineers. But he took it and put it on his toe, and bam, blew his toe off, blew his foot off, the whole front of his foot off. And he hollered, "Medic, medic, medic!" And so I was so mad because, to start with, he had been transferred to our company from 596. And they had him carrying a machine gun ammo. About 3 days before that, we was up on a long slope, and we were just fighting all the way up, and the Germans were just that relay, retreating, and fighting all the way. And we got up there, and the machine gunner set up the gun, and he said this kid was supposed to be carrying those boxes of machine gun belts. And he said he didn't have them. And the Kinder asked him, he said, "Where's that?" He said, "I threw them away, they're too heavy." Well, Kinder was going to kill him, but we stopped that. But he not beat the shit out of him, pardon me. But then that kid 2 days later did that. And so the officers were trying to figure out, he said it went off accidentally. And I was so mad, I told the officer, our company man, I said, he shot his foot off. I saw him. And so they had out in the field, court-martial.
Right.
And court-martialed him. I don't know what happened. They took him to the hospital naturally, but he got out of combat that way. But,
never saw him again.
Never saw him again. I don't even know his name now. It's been so many years.
Right.
But I don't know whether you want to even hear about that or not.
That's a good story, too. We want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Okay.
So.
But anyway, they wanted to know if I would testify against him. I said, "You darn right." And the reason was, we didn't like him because he dropped threw the ammunition away. Here we are with a 30 caliber machine gun and no ammunition.
Right.
And he didn't like us. And he was trying to get away from our outfit, But I don't, like I say, I don't even remember his name. And we fought with the French. We was attached to the French at times, and with the Italian army at times. We fought. See, to backtrack maybe a little, they pulled us out of the 17th Division when we was in the Tennessee maneuvers, and shipped us out real fast to go over to jump in Anzio. Anzio Beach they couldn't break through, and they had Ranger jump. They lost them, and a couple other companies or something. But anyway, we went over on the ships, and when we landed at Naples, Anzio had broke through, and they were going up close to Rome.
Right.
So we were still there. So they just used us as shock troops. If you go over here, maybe 30, 40 miles, fight with them. Go over here, fight with them, and we even went from Naples to Civitavecchia, the port up on the west coast, in landing crafts.
Right.
To get up there fast, and we fought up there. And but anyway, then after that, I can't give you how many days, but after that, and by June 6th was over, D-Day was over at that time, and they pulled us into Frascati, right outside of Rome, and trained for the southern France invasion. So now we heard that they were planning on having us go in D-Day from Italy, but they didn't have enough planes and stuff. So they held us until August 15th, and we jumped in southern France, that invasion.
Were you when did you jump in there roughly? Was it during the day, or was it?
In the morning, early morning. It was dark, in the dark. It was,
dark.
We boarded the planes probably about 1 o'clock in the morning, something like that.
Okay.
And we just flew right on top of the water, right on in and then up and into over Nice and up into Lemoyne and those places up there where were scattered. They scattered. They dumped the first couple planes in the ocean, they said, and then from there on for 20-some miles, they just scattered us. But one thing they did, it was fog, heavy fog. We dropped in the fog, and we didn't know whether we landed in the ocean or what, but we thought we was from the noise of other guys hitting, and we thought it was splashes, but it was trees in heavy force, and so we always naturally was taught in the water or anything like that to cross our legs. That was taught that, and so we would come down in clearings, little clearings, and everybody was scattered all over the place, and we had when we was. I don't know whether you want me to keep talking or not.
No, you're doing great.
But when we was getting ready for the problem, every couple of days they'd have us all come up and go by, and they had this map, one of these big topography or whatever they call it, maps with all the mountains and fields and all that, and we would go through it with the officers, and we would look at stuff, and if we wanted to ask or anything else. And the last few days we saw these fields with dots in them, all in these fields. And we asked what that was, and they said, well, they didn't know. Well, come to find out, when we landed, those were all piles of rocks with holes set in them, and 88 bullets, just the end of it, wired to go off if gliders landed. Or if us guys, they had wired between them for paratroopers. Well, none of us hit those fields. Right. And so that, we figured that was done on purpose. A smart move. It saved a bunch of us.
Did you, was there another experience that you remember vividly, like when the guy shot his foot, or the other, where those Poles surrendered to you in southern France?
I mean, in Italy?
Well, I'm saying, is there another experience that were like the ones in Italy in southern France you remember vividly like that? Those were very good stories.
Well, let me.
Where do we need to move it forward to the bulge?
Move it forward a little bit, yeah.
Okay, let's go to the bulge. What happened?
Oh well, we did our lots of fighting for 94 days. No, 64 days across France up to the Italian border.
Okay.
And then from there we got relieved. We was on the line longer than anybody outfit in Europe, without break, and mainly paratroopers, because we was only supposed to be in 2 weeks and get out. But anyway, we pulled back to Soissons, and we was starting to get ready to form. They was forming the 1st Airborne Army. Well, this was just before Christmas, and the bulge hit. And I was in the hospital the 2 days before that. They thought I had appendicitis. Well, the outfit jumped on the trucks and took off, and they wouldn't release me from the hospital for about 3 days. And I come back, and I went up to our sergeant that had our barrack that we were staying in, and they were real Army barracks, made out of brick. But I told him I was going to let him know I was going to hitchhike up the front, because we always try to get back to the outfit no matter what happened, because if not, you ended up in Repel Depot, and they could send you anywhere they want individually.
Right.
And we wanted to stay together always. And they said, no, you cannot do it, because they're shooting everybody that they think is in uniform, and Germany's dropping them all over. So I had to wait till they got a truck with coming back for supplies and that. And it was about 2 weeks before I got up to the front. And then we was in the Herdigan Forest. We was all through
about that.
Well, the Herdigan Forest, this was after we got in quite a ways in, and fighting to that. That was snow, terrible snow. And the trees they were planted trees like a cornfield. They grew them in rows, and they harvested them like that for lumber. And we was fighting in them, and we would get shelled with tree bursts all over the place. And we would dig in, and we would sleep in the snow. And 2 or 3 of us would get together and sleep to keep warm. And we put our shelter tent hats together to get in and get out of the snow. And they would put down boughs of pines and stuff under us, and that, and to keep warm. And then we would go out on patrols and getting some attacks, and they had several attacks that they got in the book on it. But then from there, let's see, where did we go? I forgot how many pounds and all that. Anyway, we ended up, the one that's most vivid is the last one we was in, and that was the Smith-Bergstein battle.
What happened? How'd you? What do you remember?
Okay, it was pouring rain, snow, sleet, and the division that had been fighting, trying to break through, called for us to come up, and they couldn't break through. And they wanted us, the plan was, we went through the biggest minefield in the history of any war at that time, and we snaked our way through in the middle of the night. Our engineers had probed us away through it and had laid their ribbons, and we crawled on our bellies in the mud. And we used to go out, and each company was 2 companies meet 3 miles behind the lines. And then we were to attack the next morning from there as this other outfit attacked. Well, we was going through, and every now and then, Juki, our captain, he led the way, and he was a great big tall guy, and hard to keep up, and we kind of got lost every now and then. So we'd have to stop and let guys keep up, because you're running in the mud and snow and everything else, and your equipment. And by that time, I was on the BAR, because when we left Italy, I quit this. Yeah. But Juki held up, and he come back to me and he said, "Traver, where's everybody behind you?" I said, "I don't know." I looked back and they're gone. So we waited a few minutes, and nobody came. So he said, "Let's go. We got to get back and get up to the, where we used to meet E Company." So we kept going and everything, and daylight came, and they had one of our little American artillery planes up there, and they spotted us, and they started bearing down on our own artillery and just knocked us all to pieces.
They fired on you?
Oh yeah, because they didn't know. They just spotted movement, so they started shelling. And at that point, there was about, in our first group where they cut off behind me, there was about, I guess, 30 guys, 25, 30 guys. Well, they knocked out everybody but one officer and Juki and me and this other kid. And so Juki told this officer to stay with the wounded, take care of them, because they couldn't go. And
they were all wounded by American shells.
Yeah, and so we.
What did people say about that? Was anybody really?
I don't know. Nobody. I've got it in my article there. Nothing has ever been said. Yeah. It was not done on purpose.
No, I know.
But we was fired on many times, even down in Italy, by our own fire. Artillery fire. Right. But he said, "Let's go, we've got to get over there and get to where we're supposed to meet E Company." It was a bridge. And we took off, and he was a great big guy jumping logs and everything else, and then this other kid was little, but we kept up as best we could. And we run onto this little prisoner, or German, just a kid. And he begged not to kill him, so we.
What did he say?
He said, "Don't shoot, don't shoot, don't shoot." They could speak certain, so much language.
What did he look like?
He was just a young, blonde-headed kid, nice looking kid, but he looked like he's about 13, 14, somewhere around there. And so we took him with us, and we got up to where E Company was supposed to be. No one was there. So we got in this shell hole, and we was going to wait till the morning. They said, well, they're supposed to attack at 7:30, the main division. Well, nobody came that day, nothing, and so we went, well, we'll wait till tomorrow. And then the next day we could hear all kinds of fighting and that, and even Americans cussing and fighting and shooting. And they had some volunteers from the 82nd and other outfits. We found this out later, was trying to get us out, and they did get a lot of the guys out. That was scattered through that didn't get the word. And so we sit there, and we think, and the second night, this kid got away. Captain Juki at that time woke me up, and he said, "Traver, the little bastard's gone." And I said, "What happened?" He said he went out to take a crap, because you didn't want. We waited till nighttime for stuff like that. And he said he never came back. So we sat there, and the three of us, and we wondered and talked for a while. And one little odd thing had happened. We was there, and we was leaning back in the trees, shrubs all around us except the shell hole. And these two officers come and stood right up like this, about that far from their boots, about that far from our heads, and smoking and talking in German. And Juki reached up and touched one of them's boot just to see if, for the fun of it. He was that kind of a guy. But anyway, we after that kid ran away, we thought, what are we going to do? So I suggested to Juki, I said, and Flynn, I said, why don't we figure this way? That kid got away, and he went back to his outfit. He wanted to go back with us to start with, but he gave up the idea, I guess. And but anyway, I said, why don't we figure that he's going to tell them he got away and he knows where we're at. But they probably will think, oh, well, they left that place. So I said, maybe the next morning they'll attack. Well, come 7 o'clock and no attack. And we could still hear the Americans cussing and fighting out there trying to get to us. And about that time, here come 8 crouched over their helmet. That's when we found out their helmets, airborne helmets, was round. It didn't have the offset. It was like the British. And we saw them helmets, and we thought they was ours because they was coming through the brush. And when they poked their heads up over the side of this big shell hole, they were crouched. And so we were sitting there, Juki with his submachine gun, me with my BAR, and Flynn with his 03. And I said, okay, Juki, what do you want to do? And he said, pardon me, F it. And they took us out. That's when they got us out of that hole. They stripped us down, and then they were going to kill Juki because he was just too frightening for them.
Why was he frightening?
I don't know.
He was too big looking?
He was just too big looking and mean looking. He was. He was a nice looking guy, but he was mean looking. But anyway, they was going to shoot him. They was taking him over the side, and I talked him into not shooting. I told him, I told this kid, he brought him up. I said, we didn't shoot you, don't shoot him. And they got the message, and they didn't. But then from there, we went down and talked to the major of theirs, and he said, we gave name, rank, and serial number, and he said, well, he ain't going to talk. He said, I'll tell you what I know. He said, and he talked perfect English. He said, I lived in New York for 20 years. And I said, but I would come home to fight for the motherland. And, I said, well, he said, and he told me exactly where we trained, the ship, the Newport News ship. We left on Newport News in the Santa Rosa ship, landed in Naples. And I said, well, how'd you figure that out? And he said, there's guys ahead of you, and talked. I never knew who any of them was, but there was other guys captured. But anyway, we talked, and I said, well, how do you guys figure you're going to win this war with as much people as you've lost and all that, and this whole attack is gone? because we was back in Germany. That was Germany. And he said, well, we keep getting promises of a secret weapon, and we're hinging everything on that. And so they put us to work hauling out dead guys and wounded of their men.
Dead Germans?
Yeah, and...
what did that do to you? Did that have any effect on you?
No, not really.
You were used to it at that point.
We were used to going up and dragging out bodies and stuff, you know, where we'd attack and have to come back and get our dead guys out, and we never drug the Germans out. Now they had, may have done it, I don't know, but anyway, he said, okay, you guys are on the long road to Berlin, because that was a joke in them days, a long road to Berlin. He said, you're starting a long road to Berlin. And they sent us out, and some soldiers came and started gathering us up in groups. First there was us three, and then we went down a couple miles down the road. This is back of the front. Yeah. And I picked up a couple more stragglers from the burgomeisters of these little villages. And
American troops.
Yeah,
legs.
American troops, yeah.
Legs, not paratroopers.
Yeah, no, and so they were paratroopers, but no, they weren't. There were only three of us. They were just regular infantry. But anyway, we walked, and then the second night, well, first night we just slept in a barn, and the second night we slept they took us to the burgomaster of this village home, and he was the head of the civilian police force, you know, army guys that was protecting the town. And he had a nice family. There was 2 girls, teenagers, going to school. We ate dinner with them. The 3 of us. There was only down to 3 there. They took together someplace. Juki was there.
What was his reaction to all this?
Nothing. We just sort of played it smart at that time, trying to stay alive to find out what happened.
He wasn't all depressed or anything?
No.
Okay.
No, and the girls got out their school books, and wanted to know where we was from in the United States, because they had books, you know, geography books and that. And then so they went to bed, and we was moved out into a shed on the back of their house, and this guarded us, and then for a couple hours he had a girlfriend in there, and they was drinking and whooping and that, and we just sat there, and she left, and he was guarding us, and he went to sleep, and I had to take a piss. So I was afraid to go out the door and get caught in the middle of going out the door and get shot. So I thought I'd better wake him up. So I kicked him, and boy, he woke up all startled, you know. And I said, I got to piss. And he said, go on out the door, which I did. And but we could escape, but where are you going to go in the middle of the night? And the second day, you know, you don't know where you're at or why or anything else. But anyway,
Did Juki want to escape?
No, he didn't then. No. We just was waiting to try and find out where we was going. So they marched us, and we picked up a few guys extra from different villages, and we went to a town, I don't know the name of it, but they put us in an upstairs jail. No, it was a big long, and there were about 300 guys, and we all slept on the floor, no mattress, nothing, just hay. And it was, they had everything barbed wired off all around the fences and all that. The walls, and we was there about 2 weeks, I guess, and they had Juki separated from us there. He went with a couple, 3 Air Force officers that was shot down and all burned up bad. But anyway, shelling, we could hear it every day, get a little closer with the big artillery. So they hooked us out, opened the door, and moved us out, and started moving out towards the Rhine River. Well, we crossed the Rhine River at Cologne, and our guards had to fight the civilians off, because they was trying to get to us with rakes and sticks and everything else, because and they blamed it on our bombers. And so we got through, went across the bridge.
Do you think you were going to make it through at that point?
Not at that point. We was wondering. But and the thing is, we had heard that in all the reports that the bridges had all been blowed out on the brine, but we walked across. But anyway, we went to a little hospital, Stalag, 12A was the number of it, and it was a hospital for wounded guys. Everybody had been wounded or was getting well, and they had doctors, and none of us was wounded at that time, but we did get to register. It was about 2 weeks after we went into battle. We got to register the Red Cross finally, and we got Stalag cards, which I've got. That's the only thing I got left. No dog tags, no nothing. But I do have my Stalag card, which is in that picture. But we stayed there several days, and then they started moving us again, and we was marching and moving. And we went up and they got us on some up to Limburg. They found trucks and stuff, and even on trains. And we got up to Limburg. That's a big They had a big Air Force and Russian and American Air Force camp, and it had been there for several years. Guys had been there a long time, but we was only there a couple of weeks. In the middle of the night, they drug us out and put us down in trucks and went down and got on boxcars on a train. And they was heading us east. And so there we, am I getting too strung out here?
That's good. Okay. Did you get strafed when you were on the train?
Yeah, we was getting strafed in that because at each end of the train they had an anti-aircraft car and an anti-aircraft car, and then ammunition cars, and we had 3 cars of us guys laying in them cars.
You guys starving in the cars?
They gave us one thing a day, either a piece of bread or a piece of cheese or a bowl of soup. But they knocked the engine off, and they tried, the guard let the guys out they wanted out, but the guys scattered. So they got everybody back, put them in, they said no more. You're just going to have to live, because the strafing was killing guys. And so
in your car, did anybody die?
Yes, they did. Yeah.
So the bullets came
right through the top, and they just went down the line, just strafing all the way.
Did anybody die right next to you, or?
Oh no, they're down at the other end. There's a couple of guys down at the other end of the box cars, because we was packed in there. Just yeah, you just couldn't. Everybody had laid down. Everybody turned the one way, and then everybody turned the other, and there was no bedding, no nothing in the bottom of it. And this was all in snowy weather.
Was Juki with you at this point?
No, he had been taken away. I don't know what happened to him from that point on. Just before that, but I didn't know at that hospital, little hospital thing. Was the last I saw of him, but they kept strafing us, and then they knocked the engines off. And this one time we hollered for the guards, and they wanted to know what we wanted up through the windows in these 40 and 8s. And we asked them if they could. We saw some lumber over there. If we could get some lumber and nail a POW, just PW, on top of the cars, and they let us do that. And then, so the Air Force, the bombers, those dive bombers, they'd get the back and then the front, but they'd leave us alone. And we rode in that for a couple of weeks, I guess, and they kept knocking off the engines. And then they'd leave the train set till they'd get another engine, clear the wreckage, and go on. And so then the Germans got smart. They would park us in tunnels in the daytime and then travel at night. But then the night fighters saw the fire of their engines, and they knocked the engines off. And finally they ran out of engines, I guess. They just stopped the train, and the engine was blowed off. And we were forced to get out and work on the tracks, a lot of times, because they tried to get it going. But then they pulled us out of the cars, and we got in a big column and started walking. And we was walking east. Well, I got watching, and Flynn was very sick. He had diarrhea, and of course we all had diarrhea and all that, but he was really bad. And so I got watching, and the guys would get sick. They'd fall in the ditch, you know, and maybe they'd shoot some of them, and maybe not. Maybe they just not kick them around. But then I told him, I said, listen, you're sick, I'm not, but I said, I'm going to fake it. And we'll fall in the ditch, and maybe we can stay together, and maybe come dark. Now, we did this in the evening, see. And I said, maybe we can crawl out and get out to a barn and hide, because I said we can hear the artillery getting, you know, they was even up beside us, and here we was heading east. Right. And so we did that, and they kicked us around a little bit and that, but they got us up and formed a straggler group, because the others was going on. And so we walked a couple of days in the straggler group and adding more to it. Well, we got to a barn, and they put us in this barn, and Flynn and I got upstairs where there was some hay, and they had, you know, guys downstairs too. So daylight come, they woke us up, and there was no more Army guard. They were civilian guards, old, retired, shot up guys. But I told Flynn, I said, don't go down there, don't go down, just stay up here. They don't know how many is here, this new guys. But then they started shooting up to the ceiling, just, you know, scare the guys down. And Flynn, he was sick. He wanted to get down, so I went with him. And they started us west. And I told him, okay, the encirclement's been done, the pincher movement probably. So we started going and going, and I was dragging him along. And so finally, I said, the civilians told us that the pinchers moved, the tanks was out like that. And so I told him, I said, let's take off now. And he said, well, they're going to shoot us. I said, no, they ain't. They're too busy fighting the ones, 30, 40 guys that are really sick, you know, and staggering along. So I said, you're sick, but I can help you. We can get going. So we faster and faster, and we got to a village, and he was getting real sick. So I went in and knocked on the door and asked a woman to make us some tea for him. So he was sitting there, and she made us tea. And we started to go out the door, and about that time, this group caught up with us, pulled us out with guns and that too. Well, just about an hour later, it was going through another village, and around the corner come a Jeep. Well, everybody started whooping and hollering, and then we found out it was German captured Jeep of ours, you know, and was in it. Yeah. So everybody got disgusted again. We kept going and that, and but a little while later, in the same town, here come around the corner comes some tanks. Well, we knew they were ours, yeah, when you got a whole, you know, tanks and this scout car in front, and they were our guys. And right away, most of these guys started going after the guards. They was going to kill them. They didn't have guns or nothing. And I told Flynn, I said, let's get on them tanks. We've got it made. Right. And so I drug him over there, and the guys pulled us up on the tanks. And those guys did give up, but I told them, I said, you guys, I'm not going to be crazy like them. They could get killed when they be safe in 10 minutes from where they're standing. Right. But revenge, you know, is a funny thing, yeah. But anyway, we rode 2 days with the tanks because they didn't have any place to put us or nothing. And so they were just rolling along, blasting, tearing up towns and villages and what have you. And then the second day, that evening, we pulled up to where they had held up and was, you know, rendezvousing all their tanks and equipment and that. And this officer come over, and he said, you know, I hate to ask you guys to do anything, because he said, we know you're in bad shape, but he said, look out in that field. He said, there's about 3,000 German troops drunk in a skunk. They just got drunk and gave up. And he said, we don't know which ones has got guns or nothing else, but we can't just leave them without somebody watching them. So he said, would you help us guard them through the night till we can get some MPs and stuff to pick them up the next day? But there were women with them and everything else, because they had women in their armed forces at that time. Right. But they were all drunk. Well, he says, you guys can do what you want to with them, you know, because we know what you've been through. And we didn't do nothing. I took a watch from a guy. He was he couldn't say nothing. But Next morning, they brought in a airfield hospital in tents, and they took all our clothes off and steamed the clothes and burned them up, and we had lice all over us, and they got the lice off, and they gave us some old fatigues and pairs of shoes, and that afternoon they brought in a C-47 and hauled all us all the way to Reims,
How many
France.
were there with you at this time? 30?
Oh, no, not that many. Probably around 13 to 15.
So 15 of you watched 3,000 of these Germans?
Yeah, well, they had their guys too, crews out of the tanks.
Right.
But they said, we just can't let them, nobody watch them or anything else.
Sure.
But anyway, that's, from there we went from hospital to hospital to hospital. And after the first one at Reims, I was in a different ward than Flynn was. And so they called out my name. Every day they'd call out, so many names to go to the next hospital. And they called my name, and they didn't call Flynn. So I went to the major, and I asked him, I said, I told him, I said, look, we was captured together. We was together before, and I said, we were hanging on together. I said, if he isn't ready to go, I'll stay here with him if you let me. He said, Traver, Flynn's not going to make it. I said, what do you mean? He said, he gave up. And he said, you know what that means? When they give up, they're gone. So I went on by myself, and I was teamed up when we went over to Camp Lucky Strike at Le Havre, France, or above Le Havre, when they had 5 big camps for prisoners, returning prisoners. And I was in Camp Lucky Strike, and I teamed up with a little Spanish kid from the 101st. He'd been in a prison camp, but I didn't know him there. He just got in another bunch. I don't know, we had all bunched up. But anyway, we was there 3 or 4 days, and Eisenhower come by and got everybody out. He was the general, and he got up on a podium thing and gave us a big talk and told us how glad they were to get us out and that they were going to get us home as soon as possible. He said we're going to take ships like the Queen Mary and them, and everybody sleep double. Everybody sleep shifts, 8 hours, in the bed and 8 hours out. And so I told this kid, I said, I don't want to go back home like that. I said, let's go to Le Havre and see what we can find the ship going, because the bombers were landing there. They had a ship. They were charging $500 a piece to get flown back into the States. The bombers were returning. Well, we didn't have a dime. We didn't have Nolte. We didn't have nothing. So we went into Le Havre and was sitting in a bar, and we did. I don't know where we got the money. We had a few bucks, but we was there, and these sailors came up and they bought us a couple of drinks, and started talking, and they said, "Do you guys have a place to sleep tonight? Because it was getting in the day." And I said, "No, we don't." And he said, "Well, why don't you come out on our ship, and we'll hang a couple of hammocks in the galley, and you can sleep there." So we did. Well, the next morning, the officers, which there was only 3 of them on the ship, a little PC, he said, we had breakfast, and he wanted to know what happened to us. And he said, can you guys, any chance you guys getting stuff to go back home? He said, we're going to go to New York. There was 10 PCs and 3 DEs. And so I said, well, we can sure try. So we hitchhiked back up to Camp Lucky Strike, and I went to the chaplain, and I told him, I said, sir, my brother's in the Navy, and he's on a ship down there in the harbor, and I said, our officers said we could go back with him if we could get our papers cleared. And he said, let me go see. And he was gone about 30 minutes, and he brought back our papers. So we hitchhiked back down, and that was in the evening, but we caught trucks, supply trucks going back down, and we got there the next morning, and it was gone. So we had a French fisherman in his little rowboat out there, and we mentioned him over, and he said, well, where's the ships out there? He said, they're around the corner, and they're going around like that. So I said, well, you take us out to them. And so he rowed us out. and we didn't have any luggage or nothing. Just we didn't have nothing but what we had on. But so he wrote us out, and we found the number of the ship, and the guys reached down and pulled us up over the fantail, which was only about that up high off the water in a little patrol craft. And so we was headed for home. But we still had troubles. They went up. It was D-Day, June 6th, and they went up from Le Havre up and around in and went through where they had been in the invasion and fired guns and went up and turned around, come back, and went to Canary Islands and stayed overnight, the ships did. And then from there we started and we got to Bermuda. Well, we stopped out in the middle of the ocean and went swimming.
D-Day a year later. It was June 6, 1945.
Yeah, this was a year later.
Yeah,
yeah. And we stopped out in the middle of the ocean, all of them ships, because the lights were allowed to be on and everything else then. And this was daytime, and we went swimming out in the middle of the Atlantic. That's a scary feeling. But anyway, everybody got back up on board of all the ships, and we headed for Bermuda. And we stayed overnight there, and our ship had the propeller shaft, the bearings had gone out of it. And so they all went to New York, and we went to Key West, Florida. They had a place to work on them there. And so we got off, and we were sick, and the dog, we had yellow jaundice and all that. And so they put us in their little hospital. And about that time, the next day, the hurricane was coming in, and so they put us in station wagons and took us into Miami to Coral Gables, big Air Force hospital.
Yeah.
It was made out of a hotel. They took over a hotel, and we was there for several days, and they were doctoring us from the yellow jaundice and that. And they kept giving us all kinds of candy and stuff like that, and milk, because they had no medicine for yellow jaundice in them days, just sweet stuff. You just had to eat all the candy you could eat and sweet stuff. But anyway, they put me on a train and him on a train, the same one.
Who's him?
That little Mexican guy,
Yeah.
101st parachute.
Yeah.
Anyway, we went up to Chicago in a big Pullman suite, beautiful red plush thing. And we didn't have nothing but the clothes on us, and we left there. I went across, had to go across town in a taxi and catch another train, the West End train, to go out to California. And I went back to Camp Beale, California. That was the main base of California at that time. And then they sent me home.
What was that like, going home?
It was a wonderful feeling, but it was,
Hard to adjust.
yes, you just didn't know what to expect, everything else. And that was it.
Great. That's a great story. Thank you. Wow.
But that was
amazing.
Yeah. But then they gave me I went down to Fort MacArthur from Beale to Fort MacArthur. That's why I had gone enlisted.
Did you have a lot of nightmares and stuff after?
I had them bad till 2 years ago.
Really?
I had first place. Physically, I'm 100% disability. I got neuropathy bad in this leg and everything, and I got a bad lung, and I didn't know nothing about what happened to us till 1981.
Sure, and then you reunited.
And I found a little ad in the paper that said anybody that's had anything to do with 517th PIR, please call this number. And I told my wife, I said, that's my old outfit. I hadn't even thought about them for years. And so I called the number, and I was in the next little town there in Texas. We lived in Texas. And the guy come over, and he was in F Company, from F Company. And we talked, and he said, they're having a reunion Florida. Can't say the name. But anyway, he said, it's going to be in 2 weeks. Why don't you go down? And I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to think about it even. So he left, and my wife and I talked for a couple of days, and she said, why don't we go down there? And I said, I'm just scared to go down there. And she said, why? And I said, no one will know me, because I've been this for years and years and years, and I probably won't know anybody. And I said, I don't know what the feeling will be with me being in a prisoner of war camp. And so she said, let's go. So we went down there, and I was looking on the plane. We went to Atlanta and then got another plane. And I was looking around to see if there's anybody else, you know, that I might recognize. None of them. So we got out of the plane, got on the shuttle, and went out to the hotel. And I got out of the bus and started up the steps. And this good big guy, Walter Rommel, and his wife Marie, which she's here. He died a few years ago. He hollered and grabbed his wife and told her, get over here. He said, look who's here. This is that Earl Traver that I told you was the only guy that would go to an opera with him in Rome. He was an opera buff. And he'd ask the guy, you want to go? Because we got passes into Rome from where we was camped, bivouacked out there. And none of them wanted to. You know, paratroopers going to opera. So I felt sorry for the big guy. He was just a big, oafish guy, a German guy, Walter Rommel. And I said, Walter, I'll go to town with you to a thing. So he said, good. So him and I went to town the next day, and we had lunch and went to a real opera, and then came back, and he never forgot it. In fact, this Marie, his wife, she remembered it too, because she was right there listening to him tell that. Well, he died just a couple of years ago, but anyway, walked up, and about that time, they all heard us whooping and hollering, old Walter, about it, and about me, and the guys started coming out the front of the lobby, and then they started, the officers, Lieutenant Captain Listener, by that time our captain, and they wanted to know about Juki. They didn't really care about me. They were worried about Juki because he was the favorite officer.
What happened?
Captain.
Yeah, whatever. Did you find out what happened?
Well, he made it home, and he got in a barroom brawl, and he was shot and killed. I don't want to say what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But didn't he escape from camp a couple times?
Oh, 3 times, yeah. He had escaped 3 times, and they dragged him back. But he was just that kind of guy. But the thing is, like you get, people often wonder, why didn't you escape? Well, here you are in the middle of Germany. You don't know where you're at. You ain't got a dime. You ain't got nothing. And you escape. Where are you going to go? Right. And this was the last part of the war. You didn't know who to trust or anything else, so you didn't know what to do.
Right.
And I always, just like I told Flynn, they used to give us 2 cigarettes a day. And I told Flynn, I said, look, I'll take 1 cigarette and we'll trade the other for food, because that was money in the prison camps. Because I said, we're going to survive. I told him, I said, I've always been a survivor and I'm going to be again. So I would smoke and a couple puffs and butt it, and a couple hours later, puffs. But we took the other 3 and bought food. And other guys would trade theirs for food right away and gobble it down in 10 minutes, and then they was out of everything. They didn't even have any cigarettes to barter. But just weird things, But anyway, they wanted to know about Juki, and I told them that we all survived. They thought we was all dead. Yeah. All them years. This was in 1981. And then from there on, I didn't know anything for years, too much about it, but I was being a POW, I lived in California, and I would go up and see if they would give me medicine, give me a break on it, and they would turn me down. You haven't been in long enough. I'd only been 64 days. And they said the law was supposed to be 90 days before you could get any benefits or anything. And so I just told her, heck with it, I don't want nothing. So we moved we'd been in Texas for years, and we moved over back to California, and a guy and his wife worked for us. We were a property manager, and he was a Navy veteran, and he would go to there at French camp in Stockton, California. He would go and get his medicines. He said, Merle, why don't you go sign up with me? Come with me and sign up. So I turned him down the first couple of times, then finally I went. And I went in there, and they signed me up on everything. And I told them, I said, I'm a POW. Because I had my wrist discharge and all that with me. And they said, well, you haven't been in long enough. You don't get nothing. They said, we'll give you a break on your medicine. I had to still pay a copay.
Yeah.
And so I just gave up there. And then when we moved to Las Vegas, our youngest son, he'd been retired from the Air Force for 20 years. And he had to go up to the AMVET Corporation to talk to them about something. He was in on that yellow, what's that yellow? Oh, chemicals. Anyway, that they gave everybody sicknesses and all that.
Agent Orange?
Agent Orange, yeah, Orange, yeah. And he was, and so he had talked to this guy, and he told him about me. And the guy said, bring your dad up here and bring what papers you got, and I'd like to talk to him. So we went up there, and the guy checked my papers over and everything, and he said, why haven't you been drawing stuff in California? I told him a story, you know. And he said, well, I'm calling Reno right now, which Reno's ahead of everything and the veterans and all that. So he called, and then about 2 days later, they called my house. Reno did. And I was downtown, and my wife answered the phone.
Janet, Reno?
No, the Reno city.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. And they called, and then she said, they said they wanted to talk to me. And she said, well, tomorrow we had an appointment with the doctors at the Southeast Clinic, VA clinic. And so I went in down there, and she said he's going to be there tomorrow. So they said, tell him to be sure and talk to this social worker. So I went down there and talked to him, and they started running stuff through and they run me through all kinds of tests and everything, and doctors and that, and finally they sent me to 3 psychiatrists. And when they called from Reno and said, Mr. Traver, you have to have an appointment with a psychiatrist. And I said, who are you kidding? I'm not going to see no psychiatrist. And they said, well, if you want to go to any part of a pension, you'll go talk to these guys. So I said, okay. So I went and talked to one. And 3 days later, they had me talk to another one. And then 3 or 4 days later, they had me talk to the third one. And he talked to me, and I'd had terrible night terrors, dreams for years, and that. And
what were they on?
Just everything, everything, a different section, but they were very reoccurring and all that. And he made me do away with all of it.
Good.
But they put me through. I got 100%. And the thing is, I was supposed to have been drawing this since 1991. The law had been changed from 60 days, or 90 days, whatever it was, to 30 days. And I should have been drawing that since 1991. Well, they did give me 1 year's back pay, which is a big help. And I've been getting full benefits, and in Las Vegas, they take good care of ex-POWs. They wonderful care. We have special doctors and everything else. Now they're building a great big multi-million-dollar hospital up on the north end of Las Vegas, for Veterans Hospital. That's all.
That was great.
I'm still alive.
Thank you.